Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, video podcast. Is it welcome back? It is.
It's your move, yeah.
It's your move, yeah. So welcome back.
My name is Werner, your name is Remo.
Yeah, so similar to being in person at church, we have to reintroduce ourselves. And we're going to dive into a conversation from our first installment of our new series, The Bench. And we're going to talk about getting to know God.
Amen. Looking forward to it.
Sounds good, sounds good. So, Mr. Foss, can we start with the mountains?
Yes.
Because I feel like, did you know all that stuff, or did you have to
Of
do the
course.
research?
No, it's...
I shouldn't have, that was my bad. I asked that question incorrectly.
No, I obviously, like all of us, knew Everest. I knew K2 was significant, and I thought Kilimanjaro was in the top 10. Because of the seven summit thing, because it's part of the seven summits. I thought actually the seven summits were the seven highest mountains, not that it was the highest mountains on each continent.
Sure. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it was fascinating to me because I was like, I didn't even know K2 existed. In my mind, Everest, Kilimanjaro were the only two mountains that I needed to know in life. But what was also fascinating to me was the number of people within our congregation who have climbed Table Mountain.
Yes.
And I believe you are one of them.
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, so now for me, because
have you climbed Table Mountain?
Never.
Have you not?
No, I've done Lion's Head. Does that count for anything?
No.
Okay.
Well, it's a nice walk, but it's obviously...
It's a nice walk. Okay. Well, now I know. Okay, well, tell me more about Table Mountain then, because clearly I'm not in the...
Obviously in the mountain life, and I am obviously by no stretch of any imagination a mountain climber, but I've done Table Mountain like most of us multiple times. And even Table Mountain, well, all the routes that I've taken several. It's not really climbing. You're walking in some form of sense, but I mean, you're not climbing where you need ropes to climb. So obviously, Everest has some tricky components to it. It's also a lot of climbing. The altitude issue seems to be the biggest issue, oxygen. And then they have these crevices. I'm not sure if that's the right word that you need to cross with they put a ladder over it. And then a ladder, yeah. So to get over it, you need to go over the ladder. Now, I've read a fair amount, I've read a fair amount, let's call it a fair amount about it. Okay. And then obviously people fall off of that thing. So one of the stories is the book that I read about the guy that's not going to do the climb, just before they get to base camp, their team leader had to quickly hurry up because one of the Sherpas fell 50 meters down a crevice.
Wow.
50 meters. And he lived.
Okay.
No, he lived. Then I read about a guy who he fell also about 50 meters, but literally people watched him drop, bang, hit the floor, and he got up and he walked away.
And was that the end of his excursion, or was he walked back into the back of the line?
I can't remember if he went back onto the mountain. I don't think he broke anything. He literally got back up. Now, these are mountaineers. These are people, obviously, that also do free rock climbing and all kinds of other things. That would now be mountaineering and proper climbing and what have you. That I'm not by any, and have never been by any stretch of any imagination. But Table Mountain, particularly when I was younger, we did a lot. We did it at night. We've done it at 12 at night. We've done different routes. I've been up there multiple times. Obviously, love it. Love it, love it, love it. Well, love it when you get to the top.
Is it a long? I've never done it. So is it a long?
Oh, there's your shortest one is a thing called Platyclip Gorge that you can do. I might even maybe one day do it with you. It's almost like stairs that go up. If you're unfit, it's about an hour and a half, and that's the shortest way up. Then some of the other routes can be 4 hours, 5 hours.
Wow, fascinating. Okay, so I asked that to ask you this.
Yes.
So would you say then you're an expert on climbing?
By no stretch of
Table Mountain.
By no stretch of any imagination on anything. Did you know that Table Mountain, the tabletop that you see, is if you were to look on a topographical map, what do you call that thing? When you look from the top and you see the outline of it. Okay. So if let's say you look from the top, let's say aerial view, and the map of the mountain is this big, then the table part that you see is about that big on that map. Okay, so yes. So the table.
Okay, go again. So the table is this big.
No. The whole mountain.
So the mountain is this big.
Yeah, the whole mountain is that big.
But is Table Mountain not the mountain?
Now that's it's called Table Mountain because of the flat section at the front of it.
Okay.
But the 12 apostles that's behind it
Oh,
are
yes.
still
Okay.
part of Table Mountain.
I see. Okay. And so Table Mount, the table piece is this big.
The table
in
piece is that big
comparison to-
in comparison, yeah. And so obviously I've taken a couple of routes to get to that top. But
That
if you now
little
look
piece.
from the top
Yeah.
of the mountain and you look at that little section, then obviously what on earth do I know about Table Mountain?
Sure. Okay. This makes the point for me. But that's then what it is like with God.
Yes.
And I just want to say this because sometimes this can seem like we've planned that. I did not know all of that. So that is interesting. I feel like God was like, haha, ka-ching. Okay. So if we translate that kind of idea of you've summited this much of it multiple times, and I know for me, what stood out to me from Sunday's sermon is, in my mind, I have read the Bible through a couple of times. I have done the commentary, especially the New Testament, having a commentary with each book and reading through each of them and learning a couple of Greek
the Greek
words.
and Hebrew, or
Learning a couple of Greek words, a couple of Hebrew
oh
words.
no, so you've not read it in Greek and Hebrew. It's,
No,
oh,
not in the
just
original
checking.
language.
No, just checking.
Yeah, no, it's part of the journey on stuff, yeah. But
Yes.
but in my mind, if you asked me, do I know God, I would have said yes. And yet what I walked away with from Sunday is realizing, sure, almost like the Table Mountain picture that I now know a smidgen of what there is to know about who God is.
I would say again, one is I will want to make that clear as well. With knowing God or anything else, I'm just a pilgrim traveling.
Sure.
Okay. And I certainly wouldn't want people to feel discouraged in saying they don't know God. We obviously, what is knowing? That would be a question. If you're talking about do I have a relationship with God, I definitely believe I have a relationship with God and I have had one for years. How much do I know of God that can be known? I think the scale is different than Table Mountain. I think it's much smaller.
Sure.
My actual knowing of God, if you look at, I was reading last night, just again some different things about our universe and how the universe was formed and shaped and to what the decimal, like that word doesn't exist, but fraction of how everything needs to be in perfect harmony for this to work. And it's expanding and it's huge and it's 13 billion years old and it keeps on going and going. And if you put it on scale, it's ludicrous. So we have a creator that we call Yahweh that is behind the creation of this.
Sure.
Okay, so I would say, and I want to correct what I say even after I say it, I would say that God is unknowable.
Okay.
By that I don't mean we can't have a relationship with God. What I'm saying is you can never reach the end of it and say,
Sure.
I know God. I know God. Now, if we look at the Yada thing, which I'm sure we'll get to, then I obviously can know God. So it's a bit of like everything else in the scriptures, it's a bit of a paradox.
Sure.
There's a bit of a tension of I do and I don't. But I think I have often been, I'm not sure if I would say misguided, but the idea of feeling safe in what I know. So I feel safe actually in doctrine and safe in certain knowledge of God as to how I think what I think God expects of me and how I think He will react to different things, and therefore I know Him.
Sure.
And I think the older I'm getting and the longer I've been around as a Christian, the more you see in life, you realize that things don't seem to always behave the way that they should, that I cannot predict God. That I would want to predict God and say, well, if A happens, then the scriptures say that B should happen, and so then B must happen, but then B doesn't happen.
Sure.
And you even see B not happening in the scriptures because the one scripture says that B will happen, but another scripture says that C would happen. So again, we can't box God. And I think for most of my Christian life, I've wanted to box God as in I can put a box around Him. I can know how God will think and act and what He will do. It's the one component. And then obviously there's the religious component of just Jesus died for my sins, which we are incredibly grateful for. But it's almost become like a slogan.
Sure, yeah. So the interesting thing to me is this idea of knowing God, and I'd love for you to give us that definition again. But I think maybe it's my youthful, lack of knowledge, is in my mind I thought the idea is to know God. And the idea for me, especially not before this series, was it's an intellectual understanding. So it is the doctrine, it is the knowing that passage A says B and C. that's how I know God. But what I'm hearing you say is that that is a potential portion of a much bigger picture of who God is. And there is a lot more to know than just, this is what the Bible says.
And not intellectually, maybe that too. But that would take us back to the passage that says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So there's certainly a mind component. Now, even on the mind component, okay, so let's take me doing a little bit of reading on mountains. I've read stories about Everest, this, that, but about mountains. The top 100 mountains, tallest mountains in the world, is all in Asia, okay? And most of them, Kilimanjaro is the largest freestanding mountain because it's freestanding. Everest, K2, all of these are almost interconnected in mountain ranges. I mean, there's no way that you can know those mountains. There's no way. You can, no matter how much you read, there will always be more.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's from an intellectual point of view. Even that which I said in, where the Kanchenjunga or something like that is the third highest mountain. Now people thought that was the highest mountain just because they measured it wrong.
Sure.
And now San Uras, that's not the highest mountain. So there is an intellectual component where I think we'll always be able to learn more and know more about God as the universe keeps on expanding, as science keeps on producing new things. But that then happens on every level. So that happens in the emotional level, heart level, strength level, that there is I think I'm giving you a perspective.
Sure.
I think that God is much bigger than we can think or imagine. He is infinite. He is beyond our imagination. The well is incredibly deep and you can never reach the bottom.
Yeah.
Now, I don't say that from a discouraging point of view because we think, well, I must know everything to then be a Christian. That's not what I'm saying, what the Bible is saying at all. What I'm saying is if we get this, and I'm not even sure I get this, but if we get this, I think we will be bowled over with wonder. It would be like someone, and you can use any analogy for this. Okay, so let's say we're on this little F1 group, the Grand Prix group.
Yeah.
I'm the least educated on the group. We all know that.
Sure, okay.
And that's why I'm silent on the group. If you've wondered, I don't make too many comments.
Sure.
But it would be like that crew, let's say, what would it be like if that crew were to able to actually go to a Grand Prix race and interact with all the drivers?
Sure.
Or at least the top 10.
Sure.
Okay. What would it be like if you arrived there on that scene? I mean, it would be like, oh my word, there's Lewis Hamilton, oh my word, he's coming to me, he's talking to me, there's Verstappen, there's this one, there's that one. And you can use that analogy, drop someone that always loved mountains at Everest or wants to go to Israel, drop them in Everest. That sense of excitement, that sense of, oh my word, okay, that is, I believe, what we should be experiencing with God every day.
Sure.
And I'm not saying we're not going to have bad days.
Yeah.
But that's the, oh my word, where I can become dull.
Yeah.
Because I've boxed. It is easy for me to box God into a certain framework. It's the point that I mentioned of love is, why does God love? Why do I say I love God? Well, Jesus died for my sins. His grace and His mercy. I mean, what else? Well, He's strong. What else? What else? What else? What else? And I'm starting to think, well, what could it be? What could it be?
Sure.
That shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
If there is a real knowing.
Sure. But okay, so because I think you're right in the sense that there is an unfathomableness about who God is. I don't know if that's a word.
I create words as well. So
but like they're just like you say, that the well is so deep that you cannot hit the bottom. But at the same time, somehow God wants us to know Him.
Totally.
Right? So there is also enough that is tangible enough for us to say, oh, I do know. And I know the first drop of water in the reservoir that is who God is, if that makes sense. Because like you're saying, even if, at least for me, and you mentioned this in the Sunday sermon, there was a time where I didn't know God, and then the light switch came on, and the little bit that I did know was enough, like you say, for me to say, dude, I'm a Christian. There's nowhere else for me to be. And so somehow we've got a journey towards knowing greater and greater and greater amounts of God. But where that takes me to is this idea of what does it mean to know God? That word that you used, that very scary word that you used on Sunday.
Let me take a step back, just because I don't want people to feel discouraged in saying that I'm saying or suggesting that they don't know God. Okay, that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is there's so much more to be known. So it's not, oh, you don't know God. It's like, let's say I love water. It's not silliest example that I can think of. I love water, and I'm in a desert, okay? And there's actually a waterfall, but there's a drop falling down, and another, and another, and another, and another. That is, now I'm tasting the water. But there's actually a whole waterfall of awesomeness that's going to be coming my way. And so the more I understand it, the more I will embrace this waterfall and want to stand under the waterfall and let it just run over me.
Sure.
It's not the idea of I only have a drop, I don't understand God. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is, if you look at the universe and how enormous, we cannot even, the numbers doesn't make sense, or how it expands, how huge it is. And then there's this speck of dust called Earth, and we are on it. And what is God doing? He's putting His majesty on display to say, I want to be known.
Sure.
So I don't want people to feel discouraged thinking, I don't know God. What I want to say is the well is so much deeper. We should never be bored.
Yeah.
I've been bored, but we should never be bored.
Sure.
I'm not sure if that makes a little bit of sense.
No, that does. And I guess it's like you said, it's a paradox. It's that tension that we have to hold of, I know God and I have an intimate, deep relationship with Him, but I also don't know God. There's still room for there's always room for growth, and that's not what we're trying to say. But there is more. There is more.
And there's more awesomeness. So there's not more, I'm in trouble because I don't know.
Sure.
I'm missing out on the awesomeness.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I would say. Yada.
Yada.
Okay, so Yada, again, I'm no linguistic expert. Yada, Adam, Yadat Eve, and she conceived. Okay, sure. That was the ESV, English Standard Version. The NIV does say Adam made love to Eve and she conceived. I just didn't want to shock people to death on Sunday by using that phrase. So why is that phrase then the same one used in Jeremiah, and mostly with the no word throughout the scriptures? I think and I'm not sure who our viewers are, so sensitive viewers, if there are children in the room, close their ears.
This is the moment. Okay.
There's obviously, how do I say this on camera? There's a difference between having sex and making love. Okay? And the world has given sex a bad rap.
Sure.
But there's actually an enormous amount of intimacy that's supposed to take place, an exchange of intimacy. So Adam was intimate, an exchange with Eve, and then physically she conceived. And so that intimacy, that intensity is what we should work towards and experiencing with God the better we get to know Him. Now, you can get falling in love with a person, falling in love with God, and that is the romantic punk. But then there is, and that's why I mentioned the second component, that it's not just emotionally driven, is walked with God. Enoch walked with God for 300 years, was faithful to God for 300 years, and then was no more, for God had taken him away. So that intimacy is also intensified by a walking with God. Okay? But the walking with God, here's where the challenge comes in. The walking with God is not just up and to the right and everything's awesome.
Sure.
The walking with God that I think develops the intimacy is trauma. Trauma in life or trauma in the relationship with God.
Sure.
Okay? So I cannot be a baby Christian. Oh, I've walked with God. No, I've just become a Christian. I've been a Christian for 5 years.
Sure.
Okay? But 40 years down the line, 50 years down the line, we obviously can't get much older than that, depends on when you become a Christian. But
sure.
I need to be able to look in the mirror and say, I've walked with God. I know God. God has... I remember watching a talk about a guy, he must have been in his 80s or older, and his opening words is, he says, I remember when, and now this guy in his 80s, and when God first ambushed me when I was 13 years old.
Sure.
Okay, and so this guy is now speaking of 60, 70 years of walking with God. And that's the experience that I got from listening to this guy, is he's not having quiet times. I'm not saying he's not having quiet times. He's not sharing about, I've had quiet times for 60, 70 years.
Sure.
I've been in the dark valley. And the dark valley, we'll talk about this later in the series, but the dark valley is horrid. The dark night of the soul is horrible. Yet, that could be the place where we get to know God in the deepest way.
Sure, and there's so much to talk about, because I do think, and I almost want to underline, I do think the world and the definition that we have of intimacy even is so warped,
Yes.
unfortunately, that it can make a word like Yada
Weird.
yeah. Because, and I know for me, a year or two ago, when I first ever heard that, I almost wanted to just like stop the recording. I
Yeah,
don't know
no,
who
sure.
that preacher is, like cancel them, because it does feel like, oh my goodness, we can't talk like that. But when you kind of bring it back and you kind of realize what God is talking about, I love the idea that it's an exchange of intimacy. That there is a God gets to be in deep into me, right? Like he gets to go into the deeper, what we would call life traps and we would call schemas and all of those sorts of things. He goes into the deeper parts of me, but then I get to go into the deeper parts of him.
Yes.
And I get to really experience
Yes.
him. And so where it takes me to is this idea of the bench.
Yes.
Because that does feel like a little bit of a random title for a sermon.
Yes.
But like, why don't we just call it knowing God?
Yeah.
Why do we call it the bench? But I think there is, and I fortunately was in that meeting, so I don't think I know there is some deep insight behind that. So give us the idea of the bench and what we're hoping people will begin to do.
That's not just going to happen. Okay, so I'm not going to, it's not an emotional flare, and I'm not saying we can't have those emotional flares. In any relationship we have them and they're good. But it's that I'm going to have to sit and I'm going to have to, I don't even want to use the word study because then we go back to academic, but I'm going to have to sit and I'm going to have to contemplate, and I'm going to have to sit there and take the picture. And let's say those pictures that I showed on Sundays, and I'm not an artist or no art by any stretch of the imagination, but just looking at those things. If you look at the Scream, all three that I showed, the Scream, the Starry Night, and the Kiss, literally it sucks you in. But you have to sit down.
Yeah.
Or you have to focus. So when I was looking for examples, and obviously my wife is artistic, and I asked her for help as to what pictures, what artists, and then she was trying to help me. Because she asked me, so what do you see? I feel like I see a painting, and that's what I see. Man, this thing's $100 million. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, but then as she gives me some details, she's go follow the brush strokes, and so she says, "Oh, the brush strokes," and I'm like, "What brush strokes? I mean, how does this work?"
Yeah.
But then as I start paying attention to the brush strokes of the Starry Night, and you see how it's almost swirling like this, then my mind wants to swirl with it. Or the Kiss, where that guy and the girl is, man, they are entangled there in an intimacy of note. But I can walk by it and miss it because, oh, have you seen the Kiss? Have you seen the Starry? I've seen the Starry Host. My guess is that most of us have seen those three paintings before.
Yeah.
I haven't. I don't know art, so I don't know what their names were, but I've seen them before. I need to sit on the bench. I need to be able to contemplate. I need to take the time. And the bench can be not just 30 minutes now, but maybe it's the bench of a lifetime.
Yeah. Sure.
Of sitting and looking and contemplating. So if I were to now actually take out the time to sit and say, where has God been in my life over the last 30 years? In the moment, he can feel absent. If I look at the last 30 years, and I've said this many times before, God is the greatest witness to my life.
Sure.
He knows me better than anyone else. I speak to God more than I do to anyone else, than I have ever spoken to anyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. It's years that roll by.
Wow. I like that picture that it's potentially multiple visits to the bench and then life as a whole, like you say. Like I may visit the bench once a week or twice a week or every day, but at the same time, it's also like my life, the whole life that I get to live
It's also that.
is also time on the bench.
And it might be for us that in the mornings or whenever it is that you have your time with God, it is, it's the word quiet time obviously gets a bad rap because it gets overused, but the idea is actually that it's a quiet time. It's a bench time.
Yeah.
You know, we should actually maybe talk about it as bench time, now that I think of it.
All right.
So how's your bench time? Or how was your bench time? And I know when we came up with that title, what we were hoping for is realizing in our language that I can say, man, I'm a bit of a dip. I think I need some time on the bench.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because I need to be able, it's that idea, and John Piper is big on this, and so I don't want to credit myself with any of his thoughts, but he mentions this example that, let's say he doesn't use Everest, but since we're on mountains,
Sure.
let's say you get on the top of Everest. Okay, you've climbed it now for 6 weeks more or less, because it's up down as you get used to the air pressure.
Yeah.
You go up, you go down, you go up, you go down, and then hour up, down, hour up. You get to the top, you're standing there at the top, and you look out over the world. What do you think of?
Cold.
It's cold.
I'm teasing. But yeah.
Would I think of me? I mean, I'm amazing. I'm so significant in this world. No, my breath will be taken away by what I see.
Yeah.
And even though I have climbed this mountain, I knew that it was with great difficulty. But as I get to the top, I will realize my own insignificance, and not in a sense of that I have no self-worth,
Yeah.
but a sense of there is something so much more beautiful and greater out there than my own little world and my desires and my ambitions and what works or what doesn't work for me. Again,
Sure.
I'll be bowled over. My breath would literally, with a third of the oxygen,
Yeah.
but my breath would be taken away. And I think what I'm trying to get at for myself and for others, because I'm not saying that I've got this down.
Yeah.
I think if we understand God better and know Him better, and we look back in the rearview mirror as God has walked with us and us with Him, I think our breath will be taken away.
Yeah.
My guess is that's what's going to happen at the end when Jesus comes back and reveals all things and new creation gets brought about. I think our breath will be taken away by what was there and what we've not seen,
Sure.
and then obviously what we will then see.
Yeah. Will be revealed.
And we're going to do next year. Sure, sounds weird saying that next year is around the corner, but we're going to do a series. We'll find another name for it. But do you want to guess what it is?
Knowing Jesus.
Knowing Jesus. We love Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a passage, and I think it's Thessalonians, that talks about when Jesus comes back to be marveled at by those who believed in Him, followed Him.
Sure.
To be marveled at. Marvel. What do you marvel at? What does it mean even?
Sure.
Okay, so Jesus is going to come back, and we're speaking about God, then there's Jesus.
Yeah.
So we should leave Jesus for next year. But
Yes.
so Jesus comes to be marveled at. That's next level.
Yeah.
That's next.
Are you looking at me? I'm like, I don't have an answer for you.
That's next level. So I'm trying to scratch on the and setting up the speakers for the series for quite high expectations. Because where we are going, actually, I thought we should have said this in the beginning. Where we're going with the series is obviously I've just set it up. Then Rima on Sunday is going to be speaking about the nature of God's love, that it's eternal, infinite, and an end. And then from there we'll follow with how we experience God's love.
Yeah.
Okay, and how we experience it through creation, how we experience it through our relationship with Him, through people, how we experience it through Jesus. So all these things come into the mix, and through a lifetime of that. And I was saying earlier on to you and to Corin or Steph, whoever, that the Enoch thing, I mean, this guy doesn't get a lot of airtime in the scriptures. But Enoch walked with God for 300 years, was no more, for God had taken him away. If that could be on my tombstone, that would be enough.
Yeah. Sure.
300 years would be a stretch, but listen, if I and I don't want to sound overly spiritual. I'm saying this is something that I would desire. You know, what does my life count for? What does it mean? If it could say on my tombstone, Werner walked with God faithfully for 40 years and was no more, for God had taken him away. What more can you want?
Yeah. But it's a lot of time on the bench.
It is indeed.
Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Hope that gives you something to think about and to talk. And again, I would just want to close and say, do not feel overwhelmed, unless you feel overwhelmed with wonder. Amen. Thank you.